final question for you is, do you have any questions for me before we begin?
Don't think so. I'm just focusing on DPS now. I was previously playing tank, and I've done a bit with healer, but that's never really been a main role for me.
Alrighty. Well then, we can go ahead and get it started here. I started the recording, and then, I'll just take a minute or so while I'm looking for something to talk about, and then we'll start going from there. Oh,
That'll do fine.
all right. So right off the bat, I think we're gonna go over something. So we're 1 minute in. We're gonna go over something in the practice range here. Are you familiar with the term crosshair placement?
Yes.
Yep. All right. Well, then we'll
Just
just do a
a
quick
second
review
to
over it
steady
because this is
yourself.
just something like right off the bat is looking like we're struggling a little bit with it. So we'll do, go over all the how it works and what you want to make sure that you're focusing on doing. Basically, you've heard the term, right? Crosshair placement is just placing your crosshair in the best place possible to hit the easiest shots and the most shots. First major step to this is making sure we're aiming head level. We're walking around doing this, and this means that we hit a lot of body shots, and body shots are not as effective at doing damage as headshots are. Headshots do a lot more damage than body shots, and therefore we want to hit headshots. So to hit headshots, we want to make sure we're aiming here, not down here, because that means that to hit headshots, we have to adjust up and to the right or up and to the left. And whenever you have to travel a further distance, this is a lot harder of a shot to hit than if you just have to go like this, right? There's a lot more adjustment, and therefore it's a harder shot and a more difficult shot. The other thing this does is it means that all of your default shots, right, we're just spamming into the team. We're just spamming onto shields around the corner, right? All these shots are just defaulting to body shots if we're aiming here. But if we're aiming at head level, all these shots are now defaulting to head level, right? So it's just our default shots are now hitting that height.
You needed killing.
Right now, there's another big step to this and that is aiming where we know people are going to be. So if we know bot just went left side, we pre-aim right there, right? We're aiming at head level right on the corner here where we know he's going to be coming from, and therefore there's very little adjustment till we get the kill, right? Now we're pre-aiming left side, already aiming head level, right? Turning the corner, already aiming at his head. And final one here. These guys are a little bit sloped down, so just like on a Torbjorn, we would be aiming down, and just like on a tank, like for example the Reinhardt who we were shooting at, we're going to be aiming a little bit up, right? These guys are going to be aiming a little bit down on, so when we turn the corner, we're pretty much already aiming
Bingo.
at their head, right? That way, just shots become much, much easier. Now this one I'm gonna have to look a little bit more at, but it looks like we're kind of doing some kind of slight micro flicks in between our shots, so we kind of like go like this. I'm just making a little bit obvious for you, but this is kind of like what I'm noticing so far is we kind of like do these kind of like weird where we're kind of like not smooth with our aim, where we kind of hit and then go off of the target and then hit and then go back off.
Not much
And
longer
in
here.
general, you're gonna want to try. I guess let me try to identify the problem first. Do you have a higher sensitivity or lower sensitivity?
I think it's probably a little higher than most,
Hmm,
but it's on 7,
7. Okay, and then do you know what your DPI is?
800, I think.
Okay, well then that's not like too insanely high, though it is a little bit higher. So you just want to make sure that you're not being too flicky with your aim. Now there are specific instances where flicking is necessary. Specifically, like flicking is necessary whenever your crosshair has to travel a long distance of space very fast. So, for example, on a fast-moving target like Tracer, right? If she's blinking around us, we need to be able to flick to get around to her fast, right? You can flick when somebody just pops up onto you. Surprise! So let's say we're shooting at these guys, and then all of a sudden Tracer sneaks up behind us. We have to be able to flick around real quick and get the Tracer, right? So that's another instance where a crosshair has to travel very far
Come up,
distance very
knock
fast.
'em down.
Another thing would be like, let's say we're shooting down here, and then all of a sudden this guy pops up top here, and then all of a sudden we're forced to flick up top because he just appeared onto our screen. So these are all instances where flicking is necessary. But if we're already staring straight at people, then all flicking does is it just makes the second shot harder. So the first shot, right, we are adjusting to the person, right? We shoot them, and then if we're adjusting off of them, then that means that we just have to adjust back to the person, when instead we could adjust to the person, shoot, and then shoot again while we're already on top of the person. And then now that means that the first shot is the hard shot, the second shot becomes the easy follow-up shot, right? But if we're always adjusting off of people after we shoot, then that makes shots a lot harder to hit. Now I'm making it very obvious to see here. When I was seeing you, is kind of like micro adjustments, where it's kind of like this, where it's just like slightly off, like where we're just hitting the person and then just looking slightly to the side of them. So just make sure that we're trying to keep our crosshair on top of somebody, keep it smooth, so that while we're going through here and shooting at people, we don't have to really do so many adjustments with our aim, and try to keep crosshair placement in mind as well, right? And know when flicking is appropriate. That all makes sense?
Yeah, I generally try to track. I do more flicky stuff, I guess, when I'm like peeking corners.
Mm.
But yeah, it does look that way. I was wondering the same thing actually,
Ready for battle.
because I don't feel like I do that, but it does look like that. So
Mm. Yeah, so when you're aiming, you use wrist aiming or arm aiming?
I lay my whole arm on the desk and use my arm, but I use my fingers to like micro precision, I guess.
Yeah, of course. When most of the time when you're arm aimer, you're also a wrist aimer. Wrist aiming only refers to when it's exclusively wrist, but arm aiming, you almost always need to also use your wrist as well. So specifically, this means that at longer distances when we're shooting at people, we're going to want to set our wrist down on the table. This way it gives us more control, because that is going to make it so that we're adjusting a lot less, and we are not using our entire arm. Our entire arm is going to be what we do when we're just kind of walking around normally. So like when we come out of spawn here, we might want to use our entire arm until we acquire a target, and then once we start shooting at something from super far away, then we might want to put down our wrist on the table. That way we have more control at a longer range. This can help you a little bit when it comes to trying to have a smooth aim and adjusting on and off of people. If you're not putting your arm on the table, then that could mean that you're just over adjusting, because at a long distance you're using your entire arm. So that could be another thing. So I'll leave that up to you to try to test out. Just try. Something you can try is pay attention to how you're moving your arm around, and see if it comes naturally when you're shooting someone at a longer range, or you're trying to be precise with your shots. If you put your wrist down on the table, or if you're still keeping it up in the air. And if you're not putting your wrist down, then that'd be something I would recommend, specifically when you're trying to be super accurate with your shots, rather than just walking around and trying to have fast reflexes. Alright, so we come out of spawn here. We can just watch this back so you can see it, while we come out here. You're gonna see we hit a lot of body shots. We're coming out here looking at people's bodies. Right, so here, body. Right, and you can see in comparison to these guys where we're aiming, right? We're not aiming at head level, we're aiming pretty low on them. And then you can see kind of the micro flicks here. So we hit Reinhardt, we flick top right. Or actually, I'll slow this down slightly so you can see it. Right, so shoot up. Right, so it's kind of like very tiny adjustments after we shot, rather than staying on them. Alright, so I like that we backed up there. That's really good.
We need to keep the payload moving forward. Get into position. Kill the Mahal. Heroes never die. Allow me to repair. This will heal.
Alright. So a whole lot more body shots there. I think the big problem there, and I think we'll go over it. I don't want to just keep hopping back and forth here. I think we'll go over it what I was going to talk about next time I see something else to go over in training range, but there we were kind of playing outside of our range on McCree. You just want to be a lot closer to people, as we were kind of trying to shoot from pretty far, and that just meant that we weren't doing a lot of effective damage from that range. Like back here, for example, we're just not really doing much with that distance, as it means that we have fall off damage. So I'll explain that and demonstrate it next time we go to the training range. Here we kind of back off when that's not necessary. We have an entire team over on point. I guess we're trying to go get back and get heals maybe, but
Yeah.
the other option we have is to just stay here in the fight and play super passive until our heals get back. Once we won the fight, we can just push forwards and use the cart as healing, or we could go and use the mini health pack, right, to get healed up. So honestly, it's not too terrible of a decision, but that could have meant the difference between your team winning and losing if we just backed off without, for no reason, when we could have just been pumping out damage. So if our team lost that fight, that would have, we would have had an impact on that. We probably wanted to stay there to help out and do things. Alright, so let's see, we have our ult this fight, let's see how we're using it. Alright, so I'm noticing a lot, so we're at 250. We're just going to leave here just so we can talk about this real quick, is just because it's becoming such a repetitive thing here with our positioning. On McCree, you are a mid-range character, so you are capable of killing. Of course, every character is capable of killing things at a long range, and every character is capable of killing things at a close range. But there are other characters who have better close ranges than you do, and at a long range, you have what you call fall off. So right here, right, we could be shooting someone in the body, and you 1, 2, 3 shots to kill. Now, as soon as you cross over this 20-meter range, you start to get fall off distance. So when we're right here, it takes us 1, 2, 3, 4 shots to kill now, right? Now we get further and further back. We're doing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 shots to kill, right? And we're back all the way over here, where now we're doing 1, 2, 3, 3, 4, whatever. That's 6 shots to kill. I hit the headshot on there on accident. All right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All right, so we're playing a lot of the time within this distance. We're playing McCree like he's a sniper, and on top of you getting fall off damage, you also don't have any scope or lowered sensitivity. So at a longer range, McCree's also just a lot more inaccurate because of the fact that these guys are real tiny in comparison to when you're right up next to somebody. They're a lot bigger, right? Tiny, right? Big, right? When they're right next to you, they become bigger and therefore easier targets to hit. And then they're all super far away from you, they're harder targets to hit. And when you're not a character that has the scope, that's gonna be a lot harder to hit. So we prefer this range right here, like within 15 meters to like 30 meters, like right there. Right, we want to stay within this range so that we're doing kind of our max damage, and we're able to kill people effectively without putting ourselves in too much danger or playing too far away. But most of the time we're playing way too far away. We're just kind of positioning ourselves in places where we're just not doing very effective damage, and therefore we're killing things a lot less. We're not doing as much, and therefore it's going to be a lot harder to kill things. Alright, so you could see that in the first fight was we were, or the first fight and a half there, or whatever, was we were like kind of poking. Our entire team was fighting on bridge, and we were poking from like really, really far away the entire time. Right, like our team was. Oh, let's see it. Oh, come on, we're skipping, but it doesn't matter. So like we kind of were poking from here the entire time while our team was up on bridge, and that just means that we were a little too far away. Where like if we hit a shot on Lucio right here, this would probably be like 4 or 5 body shots to kill the Lucio, right? So we're just doing a lot less damage from this range, and we just want to make sure we're putting ourselves a lot closer so that we can be doing more, right? Because we just spend a lot of time at long distances, and then here we're setting ourselves up again at another long distance. This is the range where we'd be doing on if we hit like let's say we hit McCree from here to there. Right? And we're shooting at McCree. This would be a 6-shot kill range. Besides headshots, headshots do more, but they're also super difficult to hit when they're like a tiny little dot, right? So we're just putting ourselves at a really, really far range here when we should be pretty much right on top of our team. Or we're looking for a high noon here, maybe. Yep.
It's high noon.
Very nice. Okay. So I like the high noon there. That's really good. Now, we did talk about that for the specifics of our shooting, and because that was a repeat thing that kept happening. But in terms of high nooning, that was actually good positioning because when we do play far away, that allows us to um, therefore not be shot at and killed, right? It gives us a lot of survivability when we go for it. So I like the timing of that high noon. I like that we didn't hold on to it, and I like the positioning. So that positioning is now better because of the fact that we used high noon. But had that just been us sitting there shooting, that would have been terrible. But I also just brought up the shooting, the distances because we were doing it on the first fight and attack as well. First,
Yeah.
so yeah, that's why I'm bringing it up. Right, a lot more body shots.
Surrender to my will. Gale the Mahal.
Very nice.
The payload has reached the checkpoint.
Alright, now once we're actually like within range, when we're within, like when we're not sitting super far away, and when we're actually shooting at stuff, mechanics aren't seeming too terrible. This was kind of like the first time, like right there at the end of that last fight, was the first time I've seen us in range of doing something, and it was the first time we were actually getting around shields, and therefore now our mechanics are seeming a little bit more solid, and we're hitting more shots. So general mechanics so far aren't looking too terrible, but I also haven't. I don't even know if I've seen a headshot so far. So just make sure we're looking intentionally for headshots, and that way we're doing a lot more damage. And then make sure as well that we're just paying attention to the other things we talked about.
Yeah, I think I generally aim kind of low, even
Mm,
when I'm like peeking a corner.
yep, and that's something we want to try to fix. Now here we're pushing a little forwards, right? Um, I If we do not back up like right now, I almost guarantee we're probably going to die here because of the fact that we're pushing forwards way too far. We're not paying attention to where's my team, right? If we were paying attention to where's my team, then we go, oh snap, I don't have my team with us, which we can tell from audio cues behind us. We can tell from looking behind us. And on top of that, we should be paying attention to where the enemy team is, watching their respawn timers, thinking about, oh snap, they probably are going to get all their players back in a second, right? So this is an awareness issue of we're pushing forwards here and getting aggressive when we probably should not be pushing forwards and getting aggressive if we understood where the characters in the game are at currently. So now we start to back up, but okay, so we get our team to come support us, but just keep in mind that just because a mistake is not punished does not mean it's not a mistake. This was still a mistake. The enemy team just didn't punish you. Let's say the enemy McCree was just a rank higher, or their Ash was just a rank, or they don't have an Ash. They have a Junkrat. Let's say their Sigma and their McCree were a rank higher, right? That means they're hitting a slightly more shots, and therefore you might be dead just because they hit one extra shot each. So just keep in mind that this was a mistake. We want to make sure we're paying attention to our surroundings, so we're not pushing forwards when we don't have a reason to.
High noon.
Another good high noon. I think this one's decent-ish. So let's rewatch it real quick. So I like that we're high nooning early in the fight. We're not holding on to it again. We're using it
It's high noon.
behind our shield, so that gives us protection. The only thing I would pay attention to, though, is the fact that it does not seem like there's too many people in our line of sight when we're using this. So the other thing we want to pay attention to is the enemy team, as we want to be using it when really they can't get away from it. So for example here, Reinhardt very obviously can't get away from it. He just got hit by Bob. He's going up in the air. He's not going to be able to get around a corner anytime soon. But the people behind him are probably going to be able to get away from it pretty easily, as you see here in a moment.
Draw.
So then that high noon doesn't get any value besides just breaking shield, which just kill the Reinhardt. But just try to make sure we're using it when they're basically out in the open. They can't get around cover very soon. But besides that, ultimates have probably seemed like our biggest strong suit so far. So just as a quick strengths and weaknesses about everything we've talked about so far, probably say that your ultimates are looking like your strongest suit so far. Abilities aren't usually too much of an issue on on McCree, and they haven't seemed like too much of an issue for you. But where we are starting to struggle a little bit is when it comes to mechanics. Probably say one of the biggest ones we're working with so far is our positioning, and then awareness coming. Awareness is usually the slowest one to identify, kind of where you're standing with it. But there have been some awareness issues as well coming in, so we'll keep that in mind as we go along. So that's kind of where you're standing so far. Right. Usually you're not gonna want to go for this aggressive play unless you have a way to get away with it. So for example, it so right here when we're doing this, they have 4 people alive, right? If we go in now, we're basically 1v4ing, right? And we're running into people's faces. This is alright. If we like went up left side, we flashed and killed somebody and then rolled out, right? This is okay if this is one single person alive. This is okay maybe even if there's one person over here, because then we can use the cover and get or team as help. Or maybe this is okay if like we have a Reinhardt right up here and we're just rolling up right behind him. But here we kind of roll up into 4 people, right? And then we die, right? Make sure that with it, when it comes to positioning, that we're not standing in front of our entire team and rolling into the enemy team, right? That's just, I think that's kind of self-explanatory of, if you're trying not to die, don't run into 4 people, right? So here
Yeah,
we
I knew this was a bad idea as soon as I did it.
yeah, and then we die as a result, right? All deaths are not, so 75% of deaths you're going to be able to improve off of, and 25% of them, not much you could have done, but 75 is enough where you can look at your deaths and go, okay, what did I do wrong? Because deaths are obviously very big mistakes. When we die, we lose a ton of value. We get 0 value ourselves, but then also we put our team at a disadvantage. So in a situation like this, where this is pretty winnable and we have an advantage, now it's even, and in fact we give them the advantage because now they have close spawns, right? So this is a 5v4, right? But now this is a 4v4 and they're about to get their player back. So we turn this into a disadvantage just from dying. So we really, really want to look to cut out as many deaths as we can. On top of that, each death is 20 seconds of time where you're doing absolutely nothing. So 10 seconds of respawn time, 10 seconds of walk back time means you can roughly round each death to 20 seconds. And that means that we really, really want to cut them out, because 3 whole deaths means that we're not doing anything for an entire minute of gameplay, which is a lot when you add that up over the course of a 20-minute match. We've died 2 times so far, right? So if that keeps it up, right, that means we would have died 10, which is that's actually a pretty good death ratio so far, but that means we would have died 10 times this game. And if we died 10 times this game, that means that we die that's 3 minutes and 20 seconds where we have done absolutely nothing. And in fact, even less than nothing, because we're putting our team at a disadvantage in the middle of fights, right? So we want to make sure we're just trying to cut out as many deaths as we can. So look at the death, try to identify the mistake, right? That's the kind of the second step here. There's usually a couple different things that kind of go into a death. First off, positioning, were you in a bad position? 2, aggression, were we too aggressive? 3, did we misuse our abilities? And then 4, were we not aware of our environment? Here, I think that this one can very obviously be summed up to aggression. We just played way, way too aggressive when we probably should not have played aggressive. Maybe also not maybe slightly a misuse of abilities, as we did kind of roll into them. So just make sure we're not doing that very often. That's only specific instances where we're kind of rolling into like an enemy team, right? So just we're paying attention to those things, and then that way the second step is thinking, okay, what could we have done instead? So the first thing was we were playing way too aggressive. The second step is going, okay, what could I have done instead of played aggressive? Well, played passive, obviously. That becomes a little bit more complicated when you're talking about, if I was in poor positioning, where could I have been positioned instead? If I wasn't aware of my environment, what could I have been paying? I just want to make sure I was paying attention. And then the third step after that is making sure that we're applying it.
Get into position.
It ain't my time.
The payload has reached the checkpoint.
And good decision to back off, though. Seems like so far we have a decent awareness of the Oh, why are we... What are we doing? Alright.
Just waiting.
Yeah, so it seems like so far we have a decent awareness of the kill feeds. So that's really good. Alright. So we're at 5 minutes. So we're going to come out here, going back to the training range. So far, a lot of our attention and effort in shooting has gone into the tanks and the shields. Now they have double shields, so this means that we could be putting in a ton of effort into just breaking their shields and shooting at the tanks, and we're not going to accomplish a whole lot because they have 2 shields, and therefore if our team doesn't have those 2 shields, they're going to basically be getting away with the value for free while we're just pelting away at the shields. And in general, shields and tanks aren't really what we want to be shooting at. Right, so that comes in at what you call target priority. What do we want to be shooting at? Well, tanks aren't it, right? We want to be shooting at DPS and supports most of the time. Tanks have 2 to 3 times the health of other characters. They have shields, they have abilities that can tank, they have mobility, and then, you know, on top of that, they just don't have statistical output like the other characters do. Though they are a very important role and they can carry very easily, their job is to create space for the damage and the supports, whereas the DPS do the damage, the supports do the healing, so therefore, they're the ones who have the statistical output on the teams, and they're the ones you want to kill, basically, right? So how that feeds, so basically that means like, we're not never shooting at tanks, right? We shoot at tanks when they're the only thing to shoot at, right? We shoot, so like if we don't have an option to get to the supports or DPS, we shoot at tanks when they're low, we shoot at tanks when they're out of position, but in any case where we have equal opportunity, so when the support's standing here or DPS is standing there and a tank's standing there, we can just shoot at one or the other, we shoot at this guy, right? Not at this guy. The other thing is we want to be actively seeking out the supports and DPS, because we can use our positioning to basically get around the tanks, right? So this means that it's not just when you have equal opportunity, but also you want to be seeking out the things that are going to be easiest to kill. So this is where you get into what you call off-angling. So if, for example, our team's sitting there, the enemy team's all on point here, they're all, you know, this is the whole enemy team, the bots here, right? This is the main angle. If we're sitting here shooting the whole time, we are doing nothing but just spamming down shields and shooting at tanks, spamming down shields and shooting at tanks, spamming down shields and shooting at tanks. Oh wait, shield broke halfway through the fight. Now we get to start shooting at stuff. But oh, guess what? We already lost 3 people, now the fight's lost, right? So this is just our life if we're just sitting here. But what we could be doing instead is going over here, right? Now this is what you call an off angle. And any angle that's different from the main angle, right? Now, from over here, we get 3 benefits. First off, this is a surprise. When we're over here, I mean, this applies less when you're on a character like McCree, but you get a surprise advantage when you're over here. When you're over here, everyone sees where you're at. They can block you, shield you, whatever. When you're over here, this means that people aren't going to be looking at you right away. You're going to have a second or two where you just get away with stuff, and then that's going to allow you to kill stuff pretty fast without them reacting. And the second thing this does is it gets you around the tanks and the shields, right? And it gets you directly to the things that you can kill very easily, maybe directly with just a flashbang right off the bat, right? The third thing this does is it creates what you call a crossfire effect. So if our team's standing there and we're standing over here, they have to choose, do we look at team or do we look at McCree, right? When they do that, they split their attention, split their focus, and that means that instead of having 6 people looking one direction, they're now split between like 4 and 2 or 3 and 3, and it's never going to be directly. It's not going to be perfect, even in in ranked or in like team scrimmages. So therefore, you're dividing attention and wasting their resources by doing this, right? And that means that both you and your team have less pressure on you than if 6 people are looking at us or 6 people are looking at our team, right? So that's all the advantages you get off of this, so make sure we're taking off angles. Now, there's a difference between an off angle and a flank, right? An off angle is inherently short and safe. Here, we could just like roll back and be with our team immediately. Therefore, this is a short and flank off angle. But a flank would be if it's long and or dangerous. So if, let's say, the enemy team's standing over there, right, and our team's standing here, and we're plating over this corner, this would be the main angle. A flank would be if we went all the way around, all the way around, all the way around, all the way around, right? All the way around. So now this is a flank. In that time, our team's losing the fight. We're not having impact, and this is also much more dangerous than if we were just right next to our team. So off angles are inherently long and or dangerous, and we're not going to want to take them too often. Now in McCree, there is a time where you can take them, and that's when we're looking for high noons. We can look for for a flank when we're high nooning, but the big thing we want to pay attention to is we're probably not going to want to go on flanks in the middle of fights. So instead, what we can do is go on that flank in between fights before the fights even started, and then that way our team's not just losing while we're AFK, right? But you're probably not going to want to go on too many long flanks when you are in the middle of a fight, and try to keep your flanks as safe as possible whenever it's an option, right? Because if we just come around here in the middle, in between fights, and then the fight starts here, we can high noon, and then now we get a good surprise advantage where we're behind the shields, right? And then that gets a nice high noon off with a lot of value, right? Keep in mind as well that all of high grounds act as off angles. When we're on a high ground, we get 3 big benefits. First off, all of high ground acts as natural cover, right? They can see us, now they can't see us. He can see us, now he can't see us. We add in a right? So therefore, all of high ground is very gives you a lot of survivability. On top of that, most characters in the game can't get up to you, and then the characters that can get to you need to use abilities, and that means that when they need to use abilities, now they're out of abilities. And so again, even more survivability. And then third off, right, we can see over here, we can see over here, we can see over here, right, we can see under here. But when we're on a low ground, we can't see over there, we can't see over there, and we can't see any of the high ground, right? So high ground gives you a ton of survivability, and it also allows you, like we were talking about before, to get an off angle. So if the same instance, right, our team standing over here, enemy team standing over here, this directly gets past the shields and the tanks, gets us directly into the back line, shoot at the things we want to shoot at, and it's very safe because we can use the high ground as cover, we can back away from the edge, we can drop to our team if we need to get healing, so it's very fast, very safe, right? So that we also want to look to use high grounds as well. So this is just all positioning stuff that and target priority stuff, so again, feeding into our target priority would go into kind of the mechanics category, so more stuff to add in onto those ends here.
Welcome to reality. Ready for battle.
Alright, so we're like 5 minutes in. So, here we kind of, we doing this back off in the spawn thing. I probably wouldn't go this far back, as it's pretty unlikely that they chase you all the way to spawn. And if they do, then you can come over here, but we kind of need to, instead of just immediately coming all the way down here when our team is still, when what we could be doing is still maybe poking and killing the McCree who's out of position here. Instead, we could maybe like back up around the corner and listen with our ears and go, okay, are they pushing? Like, are they walking towards me? And if they're starting to, or you could peek the corner and see, are they walking towards me? And if they start walking towards you, or that you hear them walking towards you, then you can run away. But we did this kind of twice where we kind of ran all the way to spawn, and then that meant that we could be poking at things, like we could be just doing damage here, and we're not. Like, we could probably kill the McCree here pretty easily had we been around the corner. You're also going to notice that, our team is, Ash is here, our Ryan is here, and we're still probably like 6-7 seconds away from actually doing anything. So this is just putting us outside of the fight for a really long time. Make sure you grab the health pack there, pay attention to your health bar. When we're low, that's another awareness thing of HUD awareness and paying attention to our health. And when we are low, try to get healing. Alright, so again, look at where your team's all at. So we just want to make sure we're not lagging too far behind them. So we probably need to run that far away. Okay. Pay attention to your health bar, right? So anytime we see ourselves take damage, you want to look at our health, because now we're coming in at half health, and that's going to mean we die extra fast. Twice as fast, in fact. That's a tongue twister. Twice as fast, in fact. Okay, so here again, super long range. Shooting at Ryan and shields, not going for off angles or flanks or anything. So we're just not really getting max impact. And you'll notice that positioning sets up mechanics. You could have the best mechanics in the world, but be playing like this and not really have much of an impact, because we spend nothing. We are doing less damage. We're shooting into shields and tanks, and therefore we're not doing as much as we could as if we were respecting those other positioning rules. And when we have better positioning, therefore we have better mechanics because we are setting up our mechanics to be able to do things. So your positioning and your mechanics go hand in hand here, on how you look to improve on them. Right. So right here, when we take damage, so let's try to time this correctly when we get hit. Okay, so when you take damage, you are going to see a whole bunch of things. First off, you hear your character go, right? You hear a big old sound effect. The second thing is right above your crosshair. Look at the red marks on your right above your crosshair here. That shows you the direction that damage came from, as well as like kind of usually it'll tell you like how much damage. Like if it's a big red mark, that's a lot of damage, or and if it's a tiny little one, that may not be so much. It's just a tiny little poke. The other thing is on the very top of your screen versus the bottom of your screen, you have a big old red marks that tell you the direction of damage that it's coming from, right? It's coming from forwards, because I mean, it could also mean it's coming from above, but they don't have we don't have a reason to think that they have something that is above us, right? So damage is coming from forwards. You'll also notice that when you are low HP, your character is going to be making some different sounds as well. So in comparison, when we are just taking damage and we're full HP, he might go, ah, right? But when you're low, he makes a, right, a big old gasp, right? The other thing is that all around the corners of our screen, you're going to notice that things start to get a little bit red. So usually this on the left side of your screen, and you notice it mainly here, is you're not really going to see those little red tints, but that's here because we're 50 HP, right? Usually that isn't there, but it's here now because of the fact that we're low. So when we get all of these different indicators, we want to glance at our health bar, go, oh snap, I'm 54 HP, and then therefore be requesting healing. When you request healing, that lets your supports know in-game where you are, right? So the same way that you can hear like for someone flanking you, or hear when a Genji blades where he's at, when you press I need healing, the supports can go, oh snap, McCree's to my left and he needs healing, right? So it gets you healing much, much faster. The other thing we can look to do is go and grab the Mega Health Pack behind us. Right, but we don't press the button, we don't pay attention to our health bar, and then again we sit at 76 HP, right? Again, very low. We're gonna die like pretty much with one tap of of anything. Okay, case in point. We also here we die for for one reason, awareness, but two sub reasons in between that, right? We died first off because we didn't pay attention to our health bar, so we came in, so McCree flanked us, and we were half HP, so that meant that we died extra fast. And then second off, because we didn't listen and pay attention to our flank. So here McCree gets away with it because we weren't paying attention to him. So that's another awareness thing. Make sure that we are listening and using our ears for footsteps, for gunshots, for abilities, for ultimates, and for flankers, right? And on top of that, make sure we're watching and paying attention to our flank angles. And for example, this one, right? We don't really have to pay too much attention to this thing, because unless we know somebody went down there, because it's very unlikely that they went down there. So this one is like really the only thing we need to pay attention to, right? So we can shoot down main and really just listen to our left. And if we're listening, then we'll probably be able to hear them. But we can also once in a while glance over there, or we can be glancing over there if we wanted to, right? That way we're not getting caught out by the McCree, because he just kind of runs into us, right clicks, and then we're done. So here, make sure you're paying attention to your environment and the things around you, because when you do, you're going to be able to make some better decisions. Again, another death, so now we're up to like 4, I believe, maybe, or 3. Actually, I haven't, so we were at 2 before. That was, maybe that's only 3, actually. So that's actually a decent, that's a pretty good death ratio for what we have right now. But, I mean, any deaths is a bad death, or not any deaths, but, you know, most deaths are going to be bad, so as many as we can cut out is going to be really good. Very nice there. That right there is crosshair placement, right? So we shooting at the McCree, right? We go tap, right? We go tap, right? And then we know McCree's going to go left side. We saw him go left, right? He's walking to the left. So we pre-aim on left, directly where he's at. and therefore he walks straight into our shot, and there's very little adjustment. Imagine if instead we just kept aiming at that same door. Now, if we tried to hit the McCree when he went left side, now we'd have to do a massive flick from right door to left door and be very inaccurate with our shot here. Here we have good crosshair placement, and that sets up a clean kill. So here, this is a very fantastic example of crosshair placement in terms of placing your crosshair where you know people are going to be.
Never much like you.
But still need to aiming high level as well, because we haven't hit many headshots. So here we get naded. Let's see, once we get naded,
Never much like you.
might want to consider when you get naded not walking forwards. The other thing is that, again, once again, we're walking in front of our team a lot of the time. So make sure you're sticking behind your tanks, and if you're playing on the main angle, which keep in mind that flanks are only going to be an option about like 50, or not off angles and flanks, right? They're going to be an option about like 50% of the time. The other 50% of the time, they're not really going to be an option. So think, for example, like over on bridge. If the fight's happening over here, you know, and we're walking in here, where are we going to go? There's no off angle here where we could go. We could maybe like go to the side here to try to get around the shield, but there's not really much to do. There's no off angle you can go on. So off angles aren't always going to be an option, but a lot of times they are. So for example, like, you know, if our team's over here and the enemy team's over here, we could go left side like their McCree did, and then we open up with an early pick. We just roll away when we're done, and then now we're back to our team. That's an example of an off angle. Or right side as the exact same. This one's probably even faster than the other one and probably even safer than the other one, right? Because we can just go boom, 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 and then roll back immediately, and we're out, right? Now, if we're playing with our team on the main angle, make sure we're not running ahead of our teammates because that gets us killed. Instead, play behind them, and that's a little bit different than if we're going on the side, because we're on the side, we get the advantage of the surprise. It's a surprise, right? They don't know we're here, and on top of that, we can just get back very fast. Here, we're kind of running into damage because we're getting in front of our tanks, so just don't run in front of your tanks. You can go to the side of your tanks, but not in front of them, and that gets us killed there. Another preventable death. So now we'll just put the counter at like 5 or something like that. It's honestly not too terrible in comparison to some people, but you know, it's definitely 5 deaths is still something you want to, you know, look to improve at. Because you'll find that the games where you're doing really, really good, the games where you're basically carrying and doing a ton, are the games where you have like a 10 KD, is when you get it going like 40 and 4, right? If we're having 10 deaths, then yes, maybe we got like 40 kills, but now that's a 4 KD, right? That's a very, very big difference between those two, because 10 deaths and, you know, 4 KD versus a 10 KD means we're doing less than half as much as what we were doing before, right? So we just want to make sure we're staying alive, doing a whole lot more by dying a whole lot less.
How positively medieval.
All right.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Attackers incoming.
Well made real.
Stop the payload.
What the butt did that diva just do?
Der Kampf ist noch nicht vorbei.
Alright, so now we run into a predicament. So typically, you know, you're playing at plat, right?
Just below, it's like gold.
Just below, just gold. Okay, so typically, the higher in ranks you go, people are going to have a little bit better positioning here. Basically, rather than holding on the bridge here, a lot of the times teams will hold on this corner right here. You might poke for a minute right here, and then you back up to this corner. Now, since that is obviously not happening here, we want to adjust because we don't want to be one single person, the one person not holding bridge when our entire team is holding bridge. So that means we want to change up our positioning here. If we're positioning here, the reason why I didn't comment on it before is because this isn't the worst. Like, this is okay positioning if our team backs up and they hold here, because now we're getting a good high ground angle where we're getting it around their shields, getting a good flank going. So this is completely fine as long as we're playing safe up there. This is completely fine if we're fighting for the fight that's below here. But if our team is attempting to hold them on the bridge, then now that doesn't happen, and we're now playing at a range where we're very, very far away from their team. This is kind of like the max range where we're getting max fall off, like we were talking about before, where from here we're doing basically nothing. So where we're positioned right now is not where we want to be positioned. We should probably be dropping and going to like behind our tanks here and poking from this distance, so that, you know, it's not ideal, but it's better than being on the high ground there, because we're not really going to do anything from the high ground.
Okay.
You can just see how we're not really accomplishing much from here. Alright, we're doing some tickle damage, but besides that, we're not doing much.
Thank you.
Alright. Make sure that you are paying attention to whether or not you've won or lost the fight. This comes down to kill feed. Now, I haven't had to mention this too much, but I think it is just a good thing to go over real quick, as it's a pretty important thing. So basically, you know, make sure you're paying attention to the kill feed. That's the top right corner of your screen. When you see that you are up 1 to 2 people, that is an advantage. You can play more aggressive when you have an advantage, because they have less people to shoot at you, punish you, because they're down people, right? When you're up 2 to 3 people, that is pretty much a one fight. At that point, you can play super aggressive so that you can go and clean up stagger kills. And then on top of that, you don't want to use your ult in a one fight, right? But so far, I haven't seen that being a problem. And then this also goes the exact opposite way. When you are down 1 to 2 people, that is a disadvantage. When you're at a disadvantage, you might want to play a little bit more passive. But you didn't lose the fight yet. You're just losing the fight. When you are down 2 to 3 people, that is pretty much a lost fight. And at that point, you don't want to use ults, which again, not a thing I have seen us doing. So we're doing pretty good on that end. And then when we've lost a fight, we want to look to get out if possible. And if we can't get out, we want to look to let ourselves die so that we don't end up staggering ourselves. What we don't want to do is be in the middle, which is exactly what we're doing here. This is a lost fight, because it is a 1, 2, 3, 4 versus 1, 2, 3, and then we also are. They just are a lot more condensed and grouped up. We're like very spread out, so we're not. I wouldn't even maybe consider us 3, because like, what is the Moira gonna do here? So we're basically on our own. So we're trying to like 1v4 here into these guys when we don't really have any team support, because our whole team's dead. So when we see that this fight is lost, we want to look to back up. That could like we could literally just do this and walk over here and hide in this corner, wait for our team to get back, and then come back in from the high ground. We could do that as an option, but us sitting around here just increases the risk of us dying and then staggering. Are you familiar with the term staggering?
Yeah.
Yeah, so obviously not something you want to do, right? Because it's, you know, you waste time from it, and it can result in more staggering from your team. So here we just don't want to be so far pushed forwards, because that means that we're 5 HP away from staggering ourselves, right? 5 HP. And if that, like we talked about before, if that is a higher rank, maybe the Widow hits a headshot. Maybe the Moira hits us with 1/2 a second more of beam, and then we die, right? So we want to make sure that we're having good habits, so that when we come into a higher rank, we're able to hang at a higher rank. So here, when you've lost a fight, look to back out. Don't just stick around and stay there for too long. Okay, so now we're gonna sit on the right side here. Honestly, this isn't too terrible. This is getting us a good off angle, but notice again how we're on the off angle, but we're doing nothing but just pelting Reinhardt, right? Whereas instead, we could be, you know, sitting here and pelting Moira or something like that, but instead we're just a ton of tank shooting. I'd probably say when it comes to how much we're shooting at, I'd probably say so far this game, it's looked like 70% of what we've been shooting at has just been tanks, right? The entire time. That's a very probably wants to be like the opposite, where 70% of the time we're shooting at other things besides tanks, and then 30% of the time we're shooting at tanks. All right, but it's kind of flipped around here, and that's probably not what we want to be doing. So it's just a lot of tank focusing, Okay, now we're at an advantage. We can play a little bit more aggressive. We don't have anybody looking at us. Here we probably want to be pushing a little bit closer, because we're really, really far away from everything. So we just want to, like, you know, maybe push up to the doorway here right? This way we can see more. We might even want to walk out here, maybe like take this corner, but we're just kind of like sitting back here a little bit too far, right? So just take the cues of the fight. We're at an advance. Now they use two ults, so now we might want to be a little bit more passive now that I see that, but we also are just sitting a little bit far back here.
Defense to my will. Personne n'échappe à mon regard.
I knew.
Double kill.
Good Valk, or yeah, good Valk, good High Noon. Honestly, High Noons have been close to perfect. Not too much of an issue. You, like I said before, you don't hold on to them. You don't use them in bad situations. So looking very, very solid on that. Use them in timing, and we usually get picks out of them.
To repair the damage.
And
Yeah, try to just get one person generally if possible.
which isn't a terrible thing to do with High Noon, but you know we've usually been getting 2 here. You always want to try to get as many people as possible, but going for 1 pick is definitely not too terrible with a High Noon, especially if it's like on a Valking Mercy. Make sure we're paying attention to our health bar, because now we're coming to the fight down health again. Here we're also we could be like just poking when we're kind of like not really doing anything. All right, we just spent a whole lot of like 10 seconds where we just kind of were AFKing, not participating. We probably want to be participating and shooting at things, right? All right, so we're going to exit out here and go to the practice range, and we're going to go over a bunch of stuff here. We're going to do a quick review over everything we've gone over, then go over the main points about everything, and then finally we're going to wrap up the session from there. So as a quick review, we're going to go around the block. Ability usage, we didn't really talk about it. Honestly, like on McCree, ability usage isn't like too big of a deal. Typically on hit scan characters, they're not. Like the only hit scan characters that are important with abilities are like Reaper, Soldier, and Tracer. Besides that, you know, Widowmaker's abilities aren't too powerful. McCree's aren't too powerful. What other hit scan are there? Ashes are kind of like maybe a little bit in the medium. They're just not as important as some other characters, right? McCree's just has his flashbang, and it's not really too difficult to use flash or roll. So abilities, not any problem. High Noon, close to perfect. This one is important, and we actually did really good with it. So with our positioning, we were always in good positioning. We used cover where we stood really far back. We got us a good surprise angle whenever we went for it. And on top of that, we used it. We didn't hold on to it. So sometimes I have to tell people like, hey, you haven't used your ult in 4 fights. You should probably use your ult, right? We don't have a problem with that. We also are using it in good timing. We're not using it like super late in fights, and I haven't seen us ult in a won or lost fight, so that's also another good thing. So ults, close to perfect. Only thing was just like one time where we just ulted when they could easily get away. That was literally the only thing. So really good ults. Now moving on to the categories where we did struggle a lot more in. Mechanics. So when it comes to mechanics, we talked about a bunch of different things. So first off, make sure that you are keeping in mind good crosshair placement. I saw very, very little headshots. Make sure we're trying to hit headshots. This means that we want to make sure we're walking around aiming at head level, not aiming at body level or at feet or at chest or whatever, because this body shots do a lot less than if we're hitting headshots. And we want to put our crosshair at head level, right, so we can hit more headshots, right? Second thing to crosshair placement is making sure we're aiming where we know people are going to be, right? That way we can hit easier shots. That one wasn't as much of a struggle, but it's still something to keep in mind. Right, make sure we're not flicking as much unless it's necessary. Honestly, you didn't have too flicky. That's just, you know, something to keep in mind that happened a little bit in the first fight. And then, honestly, it wasn't a tremendous big deal, but just something to keep in mind as you go through. Now, some other things to keep in mind are our target priority. Now, target priority was a pretty big one. I probably said that was pretty massive. Make sure you're paying attention to the right things to shoot at and who's the best thing for us to be killing. Not gonna, as a quick refresher, that's not gonna be tanks. Tanks have 2 to 3 times the health, ton of abilities to negate damage, and supports and DPS just have more statistical output, and they're the easier things to kill. So we want to look to focus those things, right? Now, on top of that, just make sure we're trying to do more things as often as possible. We're not taking too many times where we're doing nothing. So there's some times where we just kind of sat around, and you want to make sure you're constantly doing things. That's called actions per minute. Make sure we're trying to up our actions per minute so that we're constantly doing something. And then that is pretty much it when it comes to... Oh, yeah, I think that's it when it comes to mechanics. Maybe I'll add something in if I remember it. Now, that easily segues into positioning, and we'll right away on positioning talk about off-angling, right? Make sure that we're going for off angles so that this ties in with our target priority. Make sure we're going for off angles so that we can shoot at the things we want to shoot at. That's probably the biggest thing that an off angle does for you. Don't sit on the main angle if you have an off angle as an option, right? Come to the off angle so that we can directly bypass tanks and shields and create a crossfire effect, as well as also getting a surprise advantage and allowing us to get away with it a little bit, right? We spent, like I said before, 70% of the match just shooting at tanks when we should have been spending 70% of the match shooting at DPS and supports, right? We just had our target priority all backwards, and that meant that we're not really doing as much as we could be doing, right? Now it's not always gonna be an option. That's where when tanks are low, when tanks are out of position, when tanks are the only thing to shoot at, then we're looking at tanks, right? But when we're not forced to, don't do it, right? Or when you have equal opportunity, don't do it. Right, now, positioning on top of that, make sure that we are not trying to be a sniper on McCree. A lot of the times they're playing really, really far away while we're shooting people. This makes it very inaccurate because they're really tiny, as well as the fact that when we're really, really far away, we do fall off damage. We're not doing a whole lot of damage from this far, so you want to stick at a medium distance. McCree is a medium range character. You're going to want to stick at a medium range so you do your max damage. That way we can kill people the easiest, right? Then besides that, just make sure you're respecting cover usage. Take high grounds whenever they're an option in the middle of the fight. Don't take high ground if it's outside of the fight. No, excuse me. Don't take a high ground if it's outside of the fight, right? This is really, really good if they're right below us here. But if the fights happen, if we're standing here and the fight's happening all the way over there, we might not want to be here, right? Or if we're like all the way up over here and the fight's happening all the way over there, we might not want to be here. Yes, it's a high ground, but also we're too far away, which means that we want to be a lot closer, right? So that would be like kind of what we were doing on the first point. Take high grounds, but use high grounds when it's applicable, right? Besides that, cover usage. Make sure we're using cover. Good positioning is the usage of cover. Bad positioning is absence of cover. Honestly, we didn't do too terribly with that. That's why we didn't talk about it. Now, on to awareness, right? Awareness, a lot of different parts of awareness. So we'll go through them real quick. First one is HUD watching. Big thing in HUD watching is making sure that we are paying attention to our health, because there were a ton of times where we were just low HP and we did nothing about it. We didn't even notice that we were low health. So make sure you're paying attention to your health bar every time we take damage, and then on top of that, make sure that you are requesting healing or getting a health pack right after we see that we're low. On top of that, we're good.
Yeah, gotcha.
All right. Yeah, and then on top of that, watching kill feed, right? That wasn't too big of an issue, but it was something that came up, right? So just make sure that we are watching kill feed so that we can make sure we're paying attention to when fights are won or lost, right? Just a quick reminder, 1 to 2 is an advantage or disadvantage, and you play aggressive or passive accordingly. 2 to 3 is a won or lost fight, and no ults, and you play super aggressive to get kills, saggers, and then if you've lost, you want to get out or let them kill you, right? That's just quick watching kill feed, right? Now, on top of that, you have awareness of audio, right? So audio awareness. Make sure that we are paying attention to our surroundings with our ears, right? So listening to footsteps, right? That's going to stop us from getting flanked. Make sure we're paying attention to our flank angles, right? And make sure we're looking around us, right? Now, on top of that, probably one of the bigger ones is pay attention to where's your team, where's the enemy team, right? In-game character positions, because when we do that, we're able to have better decision making, and that allows us to, when we're able to make better decisions, we can make better decisions. If we don't know what's happening, we can't make good decisions. So pay attention to where your team's at, where the enemy team's at, and that'll stop you from getting way too aggressive sometimes, right? That'll allow you to know when you should be playing aggressive, when you should be playing passive, as there's a couple times where that was out of whack as well, right? Final thing I'd say is just make sure you're paying make sure you're not walking ahead of your team, right? That was just another thing, is just probably make that go in like the positioning categories, like don't walk in front of your tanks, right? That's something you don't want to do. Don't roll into the enemy team, and as well, focus on survivability, right? Staying alive, because that's going to allow you to do more and more and more, right? If you're staying alive. Now, main points, right? What are the main things to go over? Ult usage and ability usage are going at the bottom. Probably those are kind of tied for last place. Let's see. probably would say that positioning. This is a hard one. I'd probably say that positioning goes as the number one for today's session as into your mechanic. They kind of go hand in hand because, like, target priority feeds into positioning, but your positioning also a lot of the times is going to feed into your mechanics, right? Your where you're standing is going to allow you to kill more things. So in general, I'm going to put positioning as number one, because there are a whole lot of things to struggle with, as well as the fact that it kind of comes in front of mechanics. Mechanics comes as a very, very close number two to work on. Awareness comes in at number three, being kind of the one in the middle, and then the final four, right, is going to be our high noon usage and our ability usage. Abilities just because they're not too important and you didn't seem like you struggled with them, and then high noon looking very, very fantastic with it. Right? Any questions on anything we've gone over?
No, I think that was about it. I guess, yeah, I should think more about where the team's going to be, because I generally just kind of go to similar spots at the start without really thinking about it, and then I found myself standing way behind the fight that time.
It's
Mhm.
high
Yep.
noon.
All right. Well, then I'm going to end